Both of these lenses are 16 to 35 millimeters. Both of them are extremely sharp. One's $2,000, the other's about $1,300. Which one should you really be investing in? Well, if that's the dilemma that you have and the question you need to answer, you'll want to stay tuned to the very end. I gotta be honest with you guys. I've used both of these lenses, and actually I'm filming on one of them right now. I'll reveal later which one I'm filming on. But I have to say that I like them both and that they are very sharp. Sony is no slouch when it comes to creating high quality equipment. Whether you're using a Sony a7S III, an FX3, an a7 IV, or even an FX6, both of these lenses are great choices. The 16 to 35 millimeter lens is phenomenal when it comes to real estate photography and videography. I personally have used both lenses for real estate photography and videography and for numerous other things, but I gotta say, there's a clear winner in my head. You can search all day long here on YouTube and find every technical spec you need to about these lenses. And while I think that stuff's great, I want my channel to be more about how it matters in the real world and what you'll actually experience when using these products. The 16 to 35 millimeter. You have a very wide angle lens and you're getting all the way down to f4 or f2.8 depending on which one you choose. One of these lenses is a G Master lens, the other lens is just the Sony G lens. The nice thing about the Sony G lens is that it's a little bit shorter, it's a little bit cheaper, of course, but you also have the power zoom. That power zoom makes a huge difference when you're trying to zoom in and out quickly to focus on your subject. I've absolutely loved using the 16 to 35 f4 lens because it's just been quick, easy, and it's light. It works really well on a gimbal. It's really fast overall, so it focuses on the subject without any latency. It's just convenient. So the 16 to 35 f4 lens has been a staple in my kit for many years now. I've absolutely loved it. Like I said, I've used it on tons of real estate shoots, and what's really nice about it is that it's extremely fast. So even when I've shot moving subjects and used it on a gimbal, it's been able to track them incredibly well. Another point of note with it is it has that power zoom feature. So when you're zooming in and out, the actual element of the lens isn't moving forward, so you're not really throwing off your balance if you're running it on a gimbal. If you're shooting handheld for most of your work, this lens too is pretty decent, even though it is a little bit lighter, which I personally like heavier lenses when I'm shooting handheld, just because it weighs my rig down more and makes my handheld footage that much more smooth. I'm an avid coffee drinker, and therefore I get a little jittery hands at times. And so this type of weight to my camera rig really helps overall. Another thing to note with the 16 to 35 f4 is that the actual thread of the f4 is only a 72 millimeter thread. That 72 millimeter thread, if you also have a 24 to 70 in your kit, or you have other lenses, you're more than likely going to have to use a step-up ring in order to fit some of your ND filters and other filters you might use on the lens. That's been absolutely no problem for me using the 16 to 35 f4, using a quick step-up ring to get all my filters screwed on easily. Now when we look at the 16 to 35 f2.8 G Master, this lens is a little bit heavier. One interesting thing to note with the f2.8 16 to 35 G Master lens is that the zoom rocker twists to the left, whereas on the 16 to 35 f4, it twists to the right. Not a huge difference, but if you're right or left-handed, it will be a little bit different when you start to film and getting used to using one versus the other. As I mentioned, the f2.8 is a little bit heavier of a lens, and there are actually more than one version of this 2.8 lens. You have the Mark I and you have the Mark II. I personally use the Mark I. While I think that there's nothing wrong with the Mark II, the Mark I is a little bit cheaper because they've made a Mark II at this point. Stay tuned for another video later on this channel where I'll go over those two in depth as well. But let's get back to the topic and talking about how these two lenses differ and which one you should consider buying. Now, if you're new to real estate photography and videography, new to filmmaking, maybe you're a social media manager and somebody's just handed you a camera for the very first time and they're telling you to pick a good lens to make everything look great and you're looking at reviews, or you might be a business owner and you're buying your first mirrorless camera to be able to show off some of your social media content and you want to do it in a professional way, which one of these should you spend your money on? If you're just getting started and you're not sure, I would highly recommend going for the f4. Here's why. The f4, as I said, it's a lot cheaper. If you're buying it full price, brand spanking new, you're gonna pay roughly $1,300 for this lens. Now, if you're buying it used and you're using things like Facebook Marketplace or shopping on B&H, even on some other websites where they have used gear, you're gonna see this lens around that $700 to $900 range when you go to purchase it. And generally speaking, unless you have the extra budget, and you know that you need something that's a little bit sharper, a little bit more on point, I don't really think that it's worth it. I used the f4 16 to 35 millimeter lens for over 3 years, and I absolutely love that lens. It got me through every single real estate shoot that I needed to get through. It was very convenient, very fast, focused on everything without any hiccups. And actually, when I went to sell it, I almost sold it for as much as I bought it for used. So definitely a lens that holds its value over time. Now, on the other hand, the 16 to 35 f2.8, I definitely would say if you're in real estate photography and videography and you know you're going to be doing it a lot, it's definitely worth the investment. Yes, it is almost a $700 increase if you're buying it retail, but it's totally worth it. This lens, when you use it, feels like a brand new 24 to 70 type of lens. What do I mean by that? I remember when I got my first 24 to 70, I felt like that was the perfect lens and that I never needed another lens ever again. I could zoom in as far as I wanted to, everything I would focus on was incredibly sharp, and overall, it just felt good in hand. My handheld footage looked great. My gimbal footage looked amazing. Everything with that lens made it feel like I was leveling up my game and becoming a better filmmaker, better videographer, and ultimately pushing into the cinematographer realm. Now, of course, there's a lot more that goes into cinematography than just videography, but you get what I'm saying. The overall quality that you get out of the image that comes out of that 2.8 is beautiful. In fact, I'm actually filming on it right now. I love this lens so much that I decided to film just about everything with it if I can. When that lens is as wide as possible at that 16 millimeter range, it's like your scene is just as beautiful as if it was zoomed in at that 35. There's something about the build quality of those G Master lenses that just differs drastically from all of the other Sony lenses. I'm not knocking the Sony G lens, the f4, but it was almost night and day when I picked up the f2.8 versus that f4. While I felt like my filmmaking was great on that f4, it was another thing when I switched to this f2.8. It's incredibly sharp, it focuses on things well, and it just feels seamless, like it's meant to be on the camera. And now when I enter really dark environments for real estate, which is pretty common, I don't have to worry about squeezing just a little bit extra out of my ISO in order to get a nice exposed image. I can go into a property where the light is so-so, and I can use my native ISO at 640 on my Sony a7S III and still get plenty of light and plenty of exposure for what I'm looking at. I don't always have to jump up to that 12,800 in order to see and exposed for the image the way I need it to be exposed. And like I said, if you're doing real estate photography, real estate videography pretty often, that makes a huge difference. It's something about getting into the editing software and not having to denoise anything because you shot wide open at f2.8 and your image just looks crisp without you really even trying. One of the downsides for using that Sony G Master lens is it being a little bit heavier. So if you're running your lens on a gimbal, you probably need a more sturdy gimbal than your average RS3 Mini or maybe even the RS4 Mini. Now, I personally haven't used the RS4 Mini yet, and I didn't run my RS3 Mini with my G Master 16 to 35, but in my personal experience of using the DJI RS3 Mini with my 24 to 70 millimeter lens, while it did balance, there would be times it didn't balance very well. And knowing that this 16 to 35 has a similar weight to it, I would say that you're probably going to experience slightly similar results. So using something like a more heavy duty gimbal might be beneficial if you're running this G Master lens. So yeah, as I said, these are both great lenses, both great picks. It just depends on what you're ultimately shooting. But let me know what you guys think about these two lenses and whether you've used one versus the other, or if you've used them both and which one you prefer. But like I said, I'll go over in another video my comparison of the G Master 16 to 35 millimeter f2.8 Mark I, that was a mouthful, versus the Mark II. But thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.